Another controversy giving Democrats major heartburn in dogging Graham Plattner, the presumptive Democratic nominee in the high-stakes Maine Senate race. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times published reports yesterday that claim Plattner's wife, Amy Gertner, told Plattner's campaign last August about sexual text messages she found between her husband and other women early in their marriage. These were messages his wife found last year, but were sent before the campaign began. Publications reported that Gertner flagged the messages while his campaign was internally vetting the candidate. A former political director for Plattner's campaign confirmed to CNN that Gertner told her Plattner had been sexting multiple women, though CNN has not independently verified the existence of the texts. Now, Gertner says she felt betrayed by that ex-campaign aide, whom she confided in and considered a friend. In a statement, she said, quote, "I trusted this person with the most private chapter of our lives, the early days of our marriage before any campaign was on our mind, and I am deeply hurt by her betrayal in the invasion of our privacy. I know who Graham is. I know the man I married and the husband he has been to me on the best and worst days of my life. That hasn't changed, and it won't." Now, the campaign also shared this video from Plattner's wife.
I find it really shameful that there's a group of media outlets and people who are willing to spread gossip instead of talking about real issues that Graham is running on, like healthcare and education and childcare.
All right, my excellent panel is back, including the man from Maine himself, Burgess Everett, a keeper of all things Senate. So how damaging, Burgess, will this be for Plattner?
Well, this comes on, obviously, the heels of plenty of other revelations about him, including his Reddit posts and his tattoo. So I see it kind of as another brick in the wall there. The problem for Democrats is Janet Mills, the governor, dropped out. So there is a mechanism for them to perhaps nominate another candidate later if Graham Plattner were to drop out, but there's been no signs of that. He's been acting, pretty defiant, I would say, since the story's out. They're pushing back hard against it. I think, you're going to hear a lot of people say this is not that bad for the Graham Plattner campaign, people that support him. I think you got to flip it on its head. This is not good for the Graham Plattner campaign. This is a problem. It's taking up all the news cycle I was seeing over the weekend in terms of these Senate races, and it's not a great way for him to enter the general election period.
Yeah, and this is why the Democratic leadership wanted Janet Mills. This is why Chuck Schumer recruited Janet Mills. I mean, she could not catch fire in the campaign, which is why she dropped out, because they were concerned about a novice candidate with a checkered past.
Yeah, Democrats have been critical of Chuck Schumer. They know that he is a good campaign strategist, but again, lots of criticism over the past year on his handling of a number of different things. The one thing that I have consistently heard from those same critics is, man, if Graham becomes the nominee and you just can't flip Maine in the general election, or if, for example, in Michigan, a non-Schumer candidate comes forward, particularly Abdul El-Sayed, then we could potentially lose a state that we currently have the majority in. Mm-hmm. And that is a problem. Does that mean at the end of the day in November, if, let's say, the Senate gets so close to flipping, Democrats in particular, flipping the majority, but they lose it because of these more unconventional, authentic candidates? I have heard already that people are very worried of that potential outcome.
It's a challenge here because it's the base, energizing the base, but that could be a risk when you have some of these candidates who have not gone facing the spotlight and face a lot of questions. One of the questions that I put to Graham Plattner himself, I talked to him back in January, and about, as Burgess mentioned, there were all these Reddit posts from his past. He said that he was a different person. He apologizes for those posts, and he says that he was, of course, he's a military veteran. He was going through a different time in his life. He was in combat. But I asked him if there were any more skeletons in his closet. I'm wondering, are there other skeletons from your past that still may emerge in this race?
No. I haven't lived a boring life, but I haven't lived a very complicated life. I've never been close to money. I've never been close to power. I've never really had the ability to screw people over. My life is not very complicated, and there is not anything else coming.
There's not anything else coming turns out there was more coming, and there have been some stories since then as well.
Yeah. Well, it would have been weird if he had answered that question yes.
Yes, I guess that's
It would
true.
have naturally created some other questions in the course of that. So that is one of those sort of like little white lies that people tell in politics. But look, the appeal of someone like Plattner is that he's a political outsider, is that he's imperfect, is that he's a regular guy who's been through the sort of pitfalls of someone who didn't come up through the political system. That being said, that means that his bio is all he has. He doesn't have a record in elected office. He doesn't have, a long resume in politics that he can point to sort of tell the voters what kind of senator he would be. And so, in an uphill environment for Democrats on the map, right, it's a good year for them vibes-wise, but still a very tough Senate map. And there is no way they get to the majority without a state like Maine, which is a blue state where Susan Collins, of course, has managed to hang on for so long.
These stories about Plattner's past have been out for months, and I've asked him about this, about the impact that this would have on him in the campaign. He said, look, this is baked in. I've spoken about this. I've talked about how I was wrong. This is not having an impact on the race. But one of the things that happened while Janet Mills was a candidate is that she didn't really launch much of a paid media attack campaign against Plattner over these posts. There was an ad she put out late, but really not a ton of money. Republicans are now spending a lot of money to go after Plattner, including this Susan Collins super PAC ad attacking him.
20 years of bigotry and hate from Graham Plattner. He calls police officers all bastards, and Plattner insults black people, saying they don't tip.
Now, again, Plattner has said that he was wrong with some of these past posts. He said it does not reflect who he is. But nevertheless, Burgess, how much of an impact will this GOP attack machine that is coming, that we're seeing on air about Plattner's past, how much of an impact is that going to have on Plattner?
I think it will have an impact in the sense of this is going to be the story. You already see how he's on the defensive. We're also seeing that in Texas, right? Like when Republicans concentrate paid and free media on something, it becomes an issue, and that's what's happening to James Tallarico as well. And you made a great point about Janet Mills, who kind of launched a small ad campaign seizing on those Reddit posts, but she didn't spend enough money for it to really resonate and sink into voters.
Yeah.
Maine is a small state, about 1.3 million people. Folks are going to see a ton of these ads, but I do think that there is a question of whether they might backfire, because I believe in 2020, Democrats launched so many ads attacking Susan Collins, supporting Sarah Gideon, that I think Mainers started to tune it out. They're not used to being saturated with these sorts of ads, these negative ads. So I do think there's a risk for Republicans to go too far in attacking him, because I do think Mainers might tune it out eventually.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And as we go to break, the poll, one of the most recent poll, had Graham Plattner up 51-42 over Susan Collins. We'll see if those numbers change in the aftermath of all of this.
Congresswoman, as a politician here, as a Democrat, what do you think this is going to mean going forward up in Maine?
My genuine belief here is that voters in Maine right now are concerned about the fact that they can't afford health care, they can't afford housing. We have the most corrupt White House in American history. Susan Collins has enabled Donald Trump at every turn, not just in this administration, but from the very first administration, by voting to confirm people like Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, voting to cut Medicaid for millions of Americans, enabling his authoritarianism. I think that is what voters right now, not just in Maine, but across the country, care about. And I think that's what's going to matter in November.
Look, I think it's outrageous. Where's the outrage? You Democrats went bananas on Brett Kavanaugh on an unsubstantiated allegation.
For sexual assault.
Well, this we're going to see. We're going to see what shoes have to drop here yet. This guy had a Nazi tattoo. A Nazi tattoo.
Nazi death squad tattoo.
Nazi death squad tattoo. Tattooed. He's derided his fellow servicemen, saying, "I wish you would have died. You deserve to die." I mean, the guy isn't. He's a terrible human being, and for your party to stand by him, this is reminiscent of Joe Biden just this past week, saying, "You know what? I know Joe was kind of out there, but we just want to beat Trump. Anything to do to beat Trump. You guys are willing to do anything,
but to be clear,
except anything.
I mean,
there's got to be a limit."
To be clear, it's the voters of Maine who thus far have chosen Graham Plattner. I mean, there was a very robust candidate in Janet Mills. She was getting absolutely trounced in the polls, couldn't raise money, and dropped out. So it is.
But
it
just
is,
come out and
but-
say
but
the allegations are terrible. This is if this were a Republican, you would be beating the hell out of the person.
Donald Trump is the president of the United States who's in the Epstein
Well,
files with allegations from
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
13-year-old.
This is the thing.
no,
This is the thing.
We're talking
It's-
about the
Hold on,
main-
let
No, I
Kate
just
in, let
quickly.
Kate in.
It's the sanctimony, not from you personally,
Right.
Nate Urban, but the sanctimony from Republicans who have embraced and allowed Donald Trump to completely remake their party and have rolled over as he's done it. It's a little tough to stomach.
So
the
it's
sanctimony
Wait a minute.
of
Wait a minute.
this.
Every
ahead, Brad.
choice is a choice. And on June 9th, Graham Plattner is going to run against the governor of Maine, someone who has a credible record, who can't raise a nickel because Democrats want someone who's crazy and awful. They're attracted to Plattner because he's awful. It's not a hesitation. It's what they want. Maine primary voters like the awful.
They're attract-
But think about what the general election is about, though. Susan Collins voted for the Affordable Care Act under Barack Obama. She voted for the Stimulus Act under Barack Obama. She voted to confirm Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. She is as centrist a person in the United States Senate as you can find. And Democrats, they prefer a Nazi death squad tattoo, sexting with a bunch of other people person over that, then they've really jumped the shark.
Well, she's a centrist who voted to confirm justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. So to call
She
her a,
voted for
to call her a
the ones in
centrist,
dissent, too.
to
She
call her a
voted for the
centrist is a
dissenters,
little
too.
I'm not so sure. But look, Democrats in Maine are attracted to Plattner because they think that he's going to upend a status quo that they feel like isn't working. I would refute the idea that they're attracted to him because of some of these things that we've seen come out. All that said, I want to say, I am having flashbacks to 2020 when Democrats lost a flippable seat in North Carolina around a sexting scandal. I think there's a lot about Graham Plattner, frankly, that is unpalatable. Look, I've been very clear on air. He was not my choice.
You
He
deserve
remains-
credit for that.
He was not my choice. But I do think we have to respect that this is where voters in Maine said they wanted to go. But look, I also would be concerned, frankly, as we've seen the drip, drip, drip here. Campaigns are ugly. Oppo research is intense. He has clearly signaled that there is more here. I think that's troubling. So I would expect that we probably are going to see more.
There'll be
here.
more.
And-
There'll be more. If Graham Plattner's saying there was no more, Brad knows this. We've all been in campaigns a long time. You don't put the good stuff out at the beginning.
Till he's certainly the nominee.
You wait
That's right.
You wait till he's the
That's
nominee.
right. Yeah,
And
10
then
days.
get locked in. It'll get worse.